And welcome back to this week's video. And from last week's video, we've been looking about for the last 2 weeks I should say, we've been looking about King Ahaz from the 2 Kings 16th chapter and how he got influenced and completely corrupted, as we saw last week. And this caused him to change the way that God instructed the temple to be and the ways offerings should be done. So the influence that he had gained from the king of Assyria had caused him to change God's instructions itself, and how God had instructed the temples and offerings should be taking place. We saw an example of this when it comes to Solomon as well last week. So we see Ahaz sacrificed to the gods of Damascus. You understand? So the influence goes that far. Also, Ahaz gathered together the vessels of the house of God and cut them into pieces. The vessels of the house of God, we see. And he shut up the doors of the house of the Lord. And he made himself altars in every corner of Jerusalem, in every city of Judah. He made a high place to make offerings to other gods. We understand, provoking the anger of the Lord. The God of his father, King Ahaz, was so despised that we understand, the God of his father, King Ahaz, was so despised what Ahaz had done when it comes to changing what God should be worshipped, how offerings should take place, and he ultimately just changed the instructions of how temples should be built itself and how they should look, we could say. God despised his actions so much when he had died. He was not buried in the tombs of the kings of Jerusalem for his consequential actions. So we see Ahaz though. When we go through more about Ahaz, we can see Ahaz is frequently mentioned by Isaiah as well as by Hosea and Micah. Ahaz's reputation was one of evil and disobedience to the Lord, leading to the judgment upon the Judah's land and people. Because the consequence, we can understand, there's always a leading consequence due to one's actions. Like we saw, because of Eve's consequence, we see, of touching the fruit, we see how it detrimentally impacted mankind. The same thing, Ahaz's influence towards the king of Assyria and his ways of changing God's instructions of how temples in itself and offerings and making offerings towards gods and sacrificing to different gods. These changes due to influence, we could see, also led to judgment upon the Judah's land and people. It's completely recorded about this, we can see, in 2 Chronicles 28th chapter, which we can read 24th to 27th verse. Let's read that. And it says, Ahaz gathered together the furnishing from the temple of God and cut them in pieces. He shut the doors of the Lord and the temple and set up altars at every street corner in Jerusalem. In every town in Judah, he built high places to burn sacrifices to other gods, and aroused the anger of the Lord, the God of his ancestors. The other events of his reign and all his ways, from the beginning to end, all are written in the book of the kings of Judah and Israel. Ahaz rested with his ancestors and was buried in the city of Jerusalem, you understand, but was not placed in the tombs of kings of Israel. And Ezekiel, his son, succeeded him as king. So from this life history, we understand, due to his fear, he surrenders to the Assyrian king and rejected God's words from Isaiah the prophet. He only gained temporary instant relief from the attack, we see. But overall, this association towards the fleshly actions led him to go away from the path of God. Initially, discussed from last week, it looks good for him that he had ended up in a safe position and he's in the protection of Assyrians. But we understand overall this will end up to do against godly ways and godly things and get the bad verdict ultimately from God and also destruction for the Israelites. We also said the same opinion from Adam and Eve. Because they deceived and disobeyed God, they ended up for the destruction of mankind, we understand. So we've understood now more about Ahaz in this week's video. So I'll see you then. See you next week's video. Bye.